Tennessee in the number 1 spot. Right behind them, Ohio State at number 3, Georgia, last year's defending national champion. And number 4, the Clemson Tigers. Dabo Swinney's got his team back into the CFP rankings. Kyle, are you shocked by this result?
I didn't think they'd actually go through with putting Tennessee number 1, but now that they did it, I think it's kind of spicy. I think it's spicy that they threw Tennessee at the top there. I didn't think they'd actually go through with it. I thought they'd still give it to Ohio State even after last week.
I mean, you look at their resume, you start looking at the resume that Tennessee is stacking up, and I find it very hard to really poke holes in giving them the number 1 ranking, because they literally just blew out Kentucky, another ranked team. Incredible performance. They just absolutely decimated them at every step of the way. And then you go back to the game against Alabama, and it was a barn burner, but they managed to get the win against Alabama, a team that we traditionally have at the top of these rankings each and every season. And Tennessee, at least for this season, seems to surpass them. And we're looking to a big game, obviously, this weekend. We'll see 1 versus 3, and that could change up the rankings a little bit. Mostly, I think whoever wins that game will be number 1 next week, I think is the big takeaway for me. I think my big surprise, though, is 4. Clemson. Why are they ahead of Michigan? I don't understand that one, really, because Michigan, if we're comparing resumes, and we agree that Tennessee is number 1 based off resume, Michigan has a way better resume to me than Clemson. Clemson does technically have more ranked victories, but I look at the victories that Michigan has, and they just feel bigger to me. Like, they beat the brakes off their in-state rival this week in Michigan State. They had the big victory against Penn State a couple weeks ago where they blew the doors off them. Their offense seems a little bit better. Their defense is really good. And I still have my questions about DJ Uiagalelei that I don't think really justify Clemson being at number 4 to me. I think Clemson's had a nice bounce back story, but I don't think that they deserve the 4 spot in the ranking over Michigan.
So quickly to your point about Tennessee, I think the argument for Tennessee not being number 1 is that they're 9-point underdogs against Georgia this weekend. So like, even if the resume says that they could be worth number 1 by beating Bama, like Georgia's probably a better team.
I think that's a mistake. We'll get into that one on the preview. Again, based off resume, Tennessee deserves to be number 1.
Yes. And to the Clemson Michigan point, those teams being 4 and 5 kind of makes me not feel like bad about the situation. I kind of stopped like really breaking down the rankings a few years ago when I kind of realized like, oh, we kind of know who the best teams are, even if the rankings say one thing. But I think it would have been weird if like Clemson and Michigan weren't 4 and 5. Like if one was 3 or one was 6 or 7, I think that would have been weird. But the fact they're 4 and 5 is at least pretty accurate. I tend to lean with you that Michigan's a slightly better team than Clemson. I guess the same thing you could point to. Clemson has 3 ranked wins this season and Michigan has 1 against Penn State. And, you know, that's kind of a byproduct of the fact that NC State and Syracuse are ranked for now, but might not be ranked in the near future. But we also saw Clemson go to double overtime against Wake. And I think that's a situation where it's like, if Clemson had lost, they wouldn't be in the college football playoff conversation. They would be in the same group as like USC and Oregon and LSU down there at 8, 9, and 10. So I think I'm kind of with you on Michigan being a better team, but I'm not really like freaked out that Clemson's 4 and Michigan's 5.
I feel like it's a little projecting ahead. I feel as though this is the rankers suggesting that they think that Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten and ultimately knock Michigan out. And I think that's what they're trying to do. It feels like they're trying to get ahead of it with giving Clemson the slight edge over Michigan. I think that Michigan, given obviously they were in the college football playoff last year, a little bit of a legacy ranking, I feel should be included in considering them. But maybe it's also accrediting Clemson.
You say legacy ranking, man. Well, Clemson's been to 5 national championships.
Just about to get into it. But recent history, obviously, we look at last year's Clemson team, and they were an underwhelming team that had no business being in the college football playoff. I look at that Syracuse win over the past weekend, and I'm still not impressed by them. I still think that their offense kind of just underwhelms me a little bit. That I feel like there's something missing about this Clemson team, and whether it's Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence, clearly those are big pieces to be missing from this year's Clemson team. I just don't think that they have it in the same way that I think Michigan has it. Like if we're put all these teams together. Obviously, we're looking forward to seeing these 4 teams match up. I think that Michigan is a better matchup for whoever is the number 1 team, even if it does turn into those blowouts we always talk about in the first round of the college football playoff. I think that Michigan this year is a better adversary than Clemson would be to either Tennessee or Georgia, whoever is the number 1 seed coming out of the SEC.
See, this is the unique situation, right? Because we've either, in the last 10 years, Clemson has either been a team that runs the table with the season and wins the national championship, or at the very least is in the same category as Alabama and Ohio State. Where this is different is that Clemson's now a tier 2 program, which is Clemson's basically this year's Notre Dame. Clemson is this year's Oklahoma. Clemson is this year's Cincinnati from last year, although I think TCU is this year's Cincinnati, which is they're going to need some dumb shit to happen in order to get in. Yes, the Big 12 is as good as the AAC. I'm saying that. But basically, Clemson is this year's version of they're going to be 14-point underdogs when they get to the playoff and get smacked by either Ohio State or Georgia, most likely. Like we've never seen Clemson in this situation, or at least not in the Dabo Swinney era. We haven't seen Clemson in that group yet. And as long as they don't shit the bed the rest of the season, they will get the playoff and probably get in as the 3 seed.
So Clemson goes undefeated. They still have precedent over TCU, you're saying?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. TCU goes undefeated and wins the conference. They can get left out, but Clemson goes undefeated and wins the conference. They're in no matter what.
I would be a little bit disappointed in that just because I feel as though TCU, I like their offense a little bit more. They have a puncher's chance, I think, in any game they get into. And I would be more entertained by seeing them in the college football playoff than I would be seeing this Clemson team in the college football playoff.
Oh, Juju, the ghosts of UCF are coming out right now. How do you think I felt in 2016 when UCF didn't make the college football playoff, huh? They were undefeated. They were fun. They were awesome. No, we're not putting them in. TCU is UCF. The Big 12 is the AAC. Suck it. It's tough break. We're not letting you in the playoff because we got to put Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia in the playoff, and you, TCU, get left out with an undefeated season.
Really disappointing to Max Duggan and the things they're building out there with TCU. But
no.
Either way, they're at 6. So if some stuff breaks their way, Alabama's still lingering there around at 6. We have TCU at 7. Oregon still at 8. USC just right behind them. LSU at 10. LSU a little bit resurgent, but they're pretty much out of the college football playoff. USC, Oregon, there's some weirdness that can happen there in the Pac-12 because Oregon, here's the thing. Their only loss at this point is to Georgia. Georgia, who, if they beat Tennessee and continue their undefeated season, there's no shame in losing to the Georgia Bulldogs in week 1, right? So if Oregon, in theory, went 11-1, won their conference, only lost to Georgia, then they have a really good case too. So that could cause a little bit of a shakeup there in the rankings towards the tail end of the season.
Well, so think about it this way. If Oregon is currently ranked 8 right now, that means they need 4 teams to drop off above them. Now, easiest one you can think of, TCU. TCU loses, easy one, Oregon can jump. Alabama. If Alabama loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game per se, or Tennessee, if they lose to one of those teams in the SEC championship game, you slide above Alabama. So then you need 2 results to come true. You need either, you just need Ohio State and Michigan to have a final result because then you would jump one of those teams theoretically. And then you just need one more weird thing to happen, which is Tennessee, Georgia, or Ohio State, or I guess whoever wins Ohio State, Michigan. You need Tennessee, Georgia, or Clemson to shit the bed, and then you can slide into the playoff. And that same thing applies for TCU. You need one of those teams to shit the bed, and then you have a path to the playoff. But if, say, for example, Tennessee beats Georgia this week, then loses to Alabama in the SEC championship game, do Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia all make the playoff? Or do only 2 of them make the playoff? And then where does Clemson slide into this mix? It's an unfortunate situation that they find themselves in as we do this playoff evaluation, which is TCU and Oregon have had fantastic seasons, and they also need someone to mess up in order for them to have a path to the playoff, because it looks like it's going to be 2 SEC teams, the winner of Ohio State, Michigan, and Clemson, making it to the playoff.